Hi guys, welcome back to Flower Class with Helen Olivia. My name is Madison and I'm going to be teaching today's Helebore class. So this should be a really fun one. I love all of the colors in today's bucket. We're going to be working with some lavenders, burgundies, some really kind of the full spectrum of purple. So this should be a really beautiful arrangement. I really like this vase that we chose today as well. It's a bit different than some of the vases that we've worked with in the past. So it's a footed, kind of similar to a compote style. So this should be really, really fun and beautiful. So earlier today, we delivered to you guys a bucket of beautiful product. Make sure that you keep everything in the bucket until I direct you to take it out. And we'll kind of go through each thing one by one. And I'll talk to you where things came from, conditions that they like, etc. So today I'm going to be using two different types of tools. I'm going to use a pair of clippers, and also just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to be using a knife. Both of these tools are absolutely great for floral design. I would say if you're just starting out and you do have clippers handy, these tend to be a little bit easier to handle. And then as you get a little bit more advanced, or if it's all you have, you can certainly use a knife. I'm using a Swiss Army knife, although a sharp kitchen knife is great as well. Just make sure that it has a smooth edge rather than a serrated edge. Also inside of your bag today, you will find a copy of your flower formula. So this is everything that's going to go into the vase. You can use it to kind of follow along and make sure that you have the right count of everything, but also it just gives you a really good idea of the ratio of different flowers that go into making a completed design. You also have a piece of chicken wire. This is going to be an excellent tool and something that I definitely recommend taking out of your vase at the end of the life of your arrangement and reusing it. So we use chicken wire absolutely every day in the shop. It is a really, really excellent mechanism you can use to create some structure for your design. So I'll show you guys how we're going to do that and kind of speak to you about why we love it so much. So we'll begin with our piece of chicken wire. I'm holding mine hot dog style, so longwise like this. I'm going to begin by folding it in half, so folding top to bottom, and then I'm going to fold side to side. So in doing so, I just created like a really messy dome-like shape. So no crazy way I wound this together. I'm just trying to get it to be a good size that I can go ahead and then slide into my vase. So that's what I'm going to do next. I like to kind of just push down on the top of my wire to make sure that I don't have a ton of overhang over the top of the vase. You may even want to kind of take your fingers and spread it out a little bit if you found that yours is really crumpled inside your vase, although mine is pretty crumpled. So if I look at my vase now from a bird's eye view, what I'm seeing is lots of little nooks and crannies that I can go ahead and add flowers to. The wire is going to create some structure, so it's going to add support to our design. It's going to keep things from moving around in our vase. And it's just overall going to make sure that we have a little bit more control as we're designing, and we can be really intentional with placement, etc. So the first thing that I'm going to do in terms of floral is I'm going to work with some of my greenery. So we are using a favorite in the shop right now. This is called Ming Fern. Is that what we are calling it on here? Yes, Ming Fern. So it looks like this. So a variety of fern, almost looks like an asparagus fern, if you're familiar with that. Love the texture on this. It's like almost looks like it would be kind of spiky, but if you touch lightly on it, you'll see it's really soft and delicate. Love the color of it. It's like this really rich green, but it's kind of dainty still. So this is going to be really fun to work with. So I should have, let's see, we have, I think about 3 pieces, depending on how robust your pieces are in your bucket. So we'll begin by pulling that out. If yours has a ton of moisture on it, you can just kind of shake it off like I'm doing with mine. And we are going to kind of use this to create some nice shape in our design, to create like a lush base that we can then add flower onto. So I'm going to begin by just taking one of my pieces of this Ming fern. So when working in vase shapes like this, I tend to like to kind of spread out a little bit. So a compote style of design or compote really lends well to kind of like more of a flowing design. So we can almost imagine that this is like a beautiful goblet and we're going to have it just like overflowing with flowers. So I'm going to begin with any of my pieces. I have one more, like my fullest piece I'm going to leave for last. So just take one of your other two pieces. It does not matter which one. I'm going to begin by stripping away everything about halfway down. So we'll just kind of pull away at this. Be careful as you're pulling it that you don't break the stem, although this is a pretty hardy stem that we're working with. And then I'm going to take this piece of fern. I want this green portion of it to start kind of right where my vase line is. So you can see I'm just having it kind of hang out over here. I've lined that up, and then I'm going to use my clippers or whatever tool you're using, and you will snip the stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. So this is, as you're first starting to design, this is a wonderful way to get a nice measurement of how long to keep your stems to make sure that they aren't sliding out of the vase, that they're scaled well to the vase itself. So I'm going to use this technique kind of all throughout class, and definitely recommend using this technique if you're still getting comfortable with eyeballing the length of your stems. So we've got our stem cut, and I'm going to go in at quite a bit of an angle. So you can see I'm almost totally horizontal here. And I'm just going to get this guy into my vase like so. So I'm even going to kind of push down on him, just gently kind of softening him up a little bit so he's not sticking too far upright. All right. Maybe I'll go even more horizontal. There we go. So the goal is that it's kind of like looks like it's gonna kind of cascade out of the vase. So I've got one low over here. I'm gonna take my next Ming fern. I'm going with my big guy this time. If you have a big guy, if not, then just take your next piece of Ming fern. Gonna do the same as before where I'm stripping away about the bottom half of my greens. And this guy I'm going to use a little bit higher in my design. So you can see again, my last piece of green kind of comes out here, and I want that to start where my vase ends. So I can hold this piece of greens. I have one going out this way, so I'm going to, rather than going straight up and down in the center of my design like a flagpole, I'm going to orient it a little bit off to the side, like so. You can use that same measuring technique to go ahead and cut your stem. And then I'm going to go in opposite that first piece I put in, and it's a little bit higher than the rest, or than the others. Okay, so I'm going to turn this guy all the way around, and then I'm going to put my last piece of Ming fern kind of on the back of my arrangement. So same with before, we're just going to strip away the bottom portion of greens. And this guy, again, he will start right on the vase line like that first piece I did, giving him a snip. And then I would just go somewhere where there's less greenery. So I've got a lot over here happening, so I'm just kind of going out the back with this guy. Just making sure I got him nice and snug in there so he's not flopping around. Okay, I can turn my vase back forward like so, and then we are going to, sorry, I've got some crunchy leaves underneath my feet and I can hear them. I hope it's not distracting. So I'm going to next up take out my mini green hydrangea. So this is going to create some really nice fullness right off the bat because it is such a large face flower and has tons of leaves on it. Your mini green hydrangea is one of the only other green things left in your bucket. So you should have 4 of them, and we're going to go ahead and take out all 4 at once. We'll begin by removing this little protective baggie, so pulling down on that to release the flower. And then I'll show you guys how we'll go about deciding how many of these leaves to leave on. I love the look of hydrangea leaves. I think they are such a pretty green color. They do excellent job of framing out the face of the flower really beautifully. So whenever possible, I will leave as many of them on as possible. And the one caveat with that is that these leaves do require energy and water as well. So I don't want to leave on a ton where it's maybe taking energy away from the rest of the bloom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my top maybe 3 or 4 leaves and see if they frame the face of the flower nicely. If they do, I'm going to leave them on. Anything else below that, I'm going to go ahead and remove. So I'm going to do that little test to all of my stems. So this is a great example. I've got lots of really beautiful full leaves that frame the face of the flower nicely, and then I'm going to remove anything below that. All right, and then same with this guy. And then our last and final one, we will do the same trick. So for this particular arrangement, we're going to get some nice spread of green around the base of the arrangement. It's going to help cover up some of what's happening below. You're not going to see any of the chicken wire, which is kind of our goal there. So my first piece of mini green, does not matter which piece we're using. I'm going to take a hold onto this guy, and I want him to kind of rest on my vase right up front. So I'm going to put him right over here, but just for measuring purposes, I'm going to kind of measure him up over here, give that stem a nice cut. I usually, now that we're working with our blooms, I will usually give my stem an extra inch of a cut, just because this technique usually gets you really close to the length of the stem, but I'll find that's just a smidge too long. So I'm going to go in again at quite a bit of an angle right up front here next to this piece of Ming fern, working that guy in there. My next piece of mini green, I think I'm going to put underneath that high piece of Ming from over here. So I want to create a little bit of support, but also fill in some space. So this next piece, I'm going to kind of fill in right here. So using that same measuring technique, and then this guy, I'm going to go in underneath that first piece of Ming fern, or second piece of Ming fern, I guess is what that was. All right, so I've got 1 and 2. I'm going to turn my vase all the way around, and then I'm going to get my next piece of this mini green hydrangea, kind of filling this back area out over here. So this is a different color than anything else we have in our bucket. So I am going to leave one piece behind to kind of put up top in our design. So for this guy, I would just recommend whatever area on the back of your vase has the most exposed kind of gold part, where there's not really much greenery happening. I would put your last piece of hydrangea, or sorry, your second to last piece of hydrangea there. So same measuring technique. And then we will pop this guy in back here. And then I'm going to turn all the way back around to the front. You can see I have my big piece of Ming fern kind of stretching out up top over here. This guy's a little bit lower, kind of cascading over the side of my vase. So I'm going to counter this big piece up top by putting my last piece of hydrangea kind of up here in this area. So this last piece of hydrangea, we will kind of measure out how tall we want to put that. So what I usually do is I'll take my thumb and my pinky finger, and then I'll measure my vase. So I'm just kind of lining my vase up here, and then I will, this size that I've got measured out here is going to be the actual size I want my arrangement to be. So my top blooms, I kind of want them hanging right around here. I have my Ming fern kind of extending beyond that because it's just kind of light and airy and breezy. So I don't want it to be super round and uniform. I do want there to be like a little bit of green kind of spreading out or creeping out from the top. But right about here is a good place to measure out for our top blooms. So I will hold my vase up right around where I want that height to be. And then we can snip our stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. And then again, I usually will give it just an extra little snip. And then same as we spoke of before, not going straight up and down in the vase. I'm going to orient it off to the side just a smidge. And that will be it. So this guy's kind of like a nice little top hat in the top of our design. So you can see, even just by adding that one single additional bloom, how much more fill we actually got pretty quickly. So mini green is wonderful for that specifically, to create some nice bulk lushness to our design. So we will kind of slide this off to the side. Next up, we are going to work with 2 different varieties of roses. This first one I'm not actually familiar with, so these are called Queen's Crown. That's a cool name. So your Queen's Crown, let's see, we have Queen's Crown, Purple Moon, Ascot. Okay, so your Queen's Crown are going to look like this. So these are almost like a garden rose shape to them. So you can see they have more of like a cabbage-like interior to them. They are going to look pretty similar to our Purple Moon roses, which when we take them out of the bucket, they look like this. So if you look closely at them, the difference between the 2 varieties is the second one, which is our Purple Moon, is going to have more of like a peachy core to it. So if you look at them, I'll get it closer to the video so you guys can see. One of them is this really interesting cabbage-like shape to it. And then we have this Purple Moon, which is more of a traditional rose style in terms of the way the petals are kind of woven together. And then also, hard to see in this video, but more of like a peachy core to it. Doesn't really matter for purposes of like naming them because we only have 4. We have 4 of both of them, but just to explain to you guys the difference between the 2. So we should have 4 of each type, and I'm just gonna pull them out and put them into little stacks. And then we have one final variety of rose, which we only have 3 of, and that is our Ascot. And our Ascot is more of like purpley, how would you describe this color? I don't even know how I'd necessarily describe this, but like, I don't know, medium dusty purple, but still very warm. So a lot of what we're using today is in the purple family, but we kind of went more towards warmer purples. So we are going to begin by cleaning up all of our roses. So we're going to do this in 2 to 3 steps. So the first step is that I'm going to remove all of the leaves on all of my stems. So we'll go through each stem, just pulling the leaves away. Be careful, some of these varieties do have thorns, so just watch out for those as you are removing leaves. Okay, so we've got all of our leaves removed. Next up, we are going to look and see if there's any thorns on our stems. So at least for me, these Queen's Crown didn't have any thorns, so our bigger, lusher ones didn't have any thorns. I do have some thorns on my Purple Moon. So the way that I will remove these, there's a couple different techniques. If you're using clippers, you can just snip them off. If you're using a knife or you have a knife handy, my favorite technique is to just kind of take the edge of my knife and kind of shave them off. So that's my preferred method. It's just pretty quick, so I like that. And then the final method, if you feel dangerous, you can take your thumb and push on the side of your thorn and it will just pop off. I also use that technique all the time as well. So really any of those work just great. And some of these thorns are going to be teeny tiny, so just really keep an eye out for them as you're looking at your stems. I'm noticing that on this darker purples, the Ascot, the thorns are pretty small, and you just want to make sure you get them off before you're handling your lot to put it into the vase. All right, so final step is to remove our guard petals. So your guard petals are the petals that are around the exterior of the flower. They are going to protect it from when it's in its bud form, developing on the bush, until it's fully developed, harvested, and in our shop. So we leave them on up until the minute that we put them into our arrangement, simply because they really do an excellent job protecting the flower, shielding it from things like wind, rain, hands as it's being harvested, etc. So we will begin by removing our guard petals. The guard petals are obvious in a couple different ways, so I'll get up close again. You can see that usually the guard petals, or sometimes the guard petals will have a little bit of a different coloring to them. So this guy's a little bit like a greeny yellow to it. They may have like bends in them like this. They may be torn or tattered or just have bruising on them. Those are all signs that they are doing their job and protecting the flower. So we will just go ahead and pop all of those guard petals off. So the number of guard petals is going to vary by flower. I would just look and see, is there anything on the side that's either distracting or bruised or torn? So I've just removed 4 of them, and then you can see that what I'm left with is just like a really beautiful, pristine rose. So we will go through and remove the guard petals off of each of our 11 flowers. So if you buy flowers from the grocery store, someone else has kind of done this step. So before they package them up, they remove the guard petal. So this is not any indication whatsoever of an unhealthy rose. This is actually a characteristic that you're going to find on every single rose, besides those that maybe, I don't know, were grown in a greenhouse and just you can't tell at all. Their guard petals are perfect. But kind of go through removing those. And our final thing, once we've got all of our roses cleaned up, is I'm going to place these into little piles or groupings so that we can kind of get them situated and get them ready to go into our vase. So I'm going to be pretty intentional about making sure that a little bit of each of these colors are on all sides of the design. So by kind of grouping them out on the table beforehand, I can make sure that I'm really kind of blocking them out into good positions throughout the design. So show you guys what my groupings are going to be. So for my first grouping, I'm going to do one of these large kind of garden rose ones. I'm going to do one of these guys, and then I'm going to do one of these. So I just did one of each. My second grouping, I'm going to do the same thing. So one of each. Third grouping, I'm going to do one of each. And then my last grouping will be just these 2 guys that are left behind. All right, so I'm going to kind of, I'm going to treat this as the front of the design, although this is an all-sided design, but this is kind of where we started out, where we had one low fern over here, and then we splayed one out, a main fern kind of coming out of the top on this side. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put one of my groupings of 3 kind of high up in my design. So we spoke about wanting it to be on all sides of the design, but we also want it to be a different height variance. So the first grouping, I'm going to kind of get right up in here between these 2 mini green hydrangea. So I'm going to take, does not matter which rose you start with. I'm starting with this Queen's Crown. And I'm going to, remember we kind of mapped out this top hydrangea as being our height of our design roughly. So this first rose, I'm going to kind of line up with that mini green hydrangea. Again, we're not going straight up and down in our design. We're going to cock off to the side a little bit, and then we can cut our stem in the same method that we used, that we've been using up until now. All right. So this first guy, I got him in right up top there. He's cocked off to one side. We will take whatever you want to use next. So it does not matter which color we're going for, but I'm going to work on getting my next rose a little bit below that guy. So we can line him up here. And the second rose, I'm going to slide in like so. So you can see that guy to the side. We've got one rose here, and my last rose is going to go kind of right around in this area here. So you can use that same technique to measure your stem, and then we'll pop this last guy right in alongside the other two. So in order to make sure that I have a little bit of depth to my design, so that it's not one big rounded ball, I will usually leave one of my roses either a little bit deeper in or a little bit farther out than the rest. So for this grouping, I put my ascot, or my darker purple rose, just a little bit deeper in than my other two roses. All right, so I've got one grouping up top over here. Next up in my design, I think I'm going to work on getting some color into this pocket over here. So just to kind of demonstrate where we'll be working over here. Start with whatever color you'd like. So this time I'm going to start with one of these guys. We're not going to go super high with this one. I'm going to start about halfway down the design. So shooting for this area right here. So we can measure this guy out. And then that first bloom will go right about so. And then we're going to aim 2 and 3 for our second roses in this grouping. So we've got this guy measured out here. And you can see that for this grouping, I decided to leave this guy hanging out a little bit farther. And then this last one is going to go right around here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we will turn our arrangement all the way around, and we're going to introduce some color in the back of our design. So you can see right now we've got kind of a big dark area over here. So I'm going to work on getting some color up in this area and then some more down here. So why don't we start down here? Does not matter which rose you begin with. I think I'm going to go for this guy. We're going to shoot for some color right about halfway down, maybe even a little farther than halfway down, but getting some color back here. And then our second one will go below that. So we can line this guy up. And this method of measuring, you pick up on it pretty quickly. So it starts to be kind of just, you start to do it without even thinking. And then eventually, as you've designed more and more, you don't even need to measure anymore. Just, you can look at the stem and you just know. Okay, just adjusting something in the front. Whenever I turn my arrangement around, it's like a whole new design. I have no idea what I'm going to be looking at. Okay, so my last pocket. So I just put these guys in down here. And then the last kind of pocket of color I'm going to work in over here. So begin with whatever rose you like. Actually, I haven't started with this darker purple yet. So maybe this one I'll start with the darker purple. And we're going to shoot to kind of get them up here so we can measure like so. Tweak this guy a little bit. And at this point, we've got enough in the vase that you guys are probably starting to feel like it's a little bit tight. So just be patient as you're kind of working your flowers in. We're going to go 2 and then 3. So I'm going to lead with this one next. And then my final one will go down here. And I'm going to just turn just so that I can see what I'm doing. And then I'll turn it back so you guys can see. Okay, so just another little grouping of 3 on this side. All right, so looking really good, filling out really nicely. I'm going to turn mine back to where we've been starting each time with our fern over here and then the top fern on this side. Next up, I'm going to take this fun type of greenery called Pierre Japonica, and just really pretty texturally, kind of almost looks like lily of the valley if you're familiar with it, but more of like the greenery variety of it. I'm going to remove any greenery that's halfway down or lower on the stem. And then this guy, here, I think I have this like little open area down low. So my suggestion would be look for somewhere in your arrangement where maybe you have a hole. I have this big, nice open cavity here, and I'm going to snuggle this greenery kind of right into that hole. So if your gap happens to be lower in your design like mine is, great. If it happens to be that you have like a big hole up top somewhere, you could certainly work this in up top. We're just trying to introduce a little bit more texture. So that is what we've got kind of going with this. Almost looks like seeded or like berry-esque. So, all right, we'll turn back to our front of our design. And now we're going to work with a few different varieties of Helebore. So this is kind of the star of the show. We are using several different varieties today. So you should have a couple pieces of each. The first is this really rich burgundy colored, which has this like purple stem and purple foliage, which I think is really exceptional. So we've got 2 of those guys. Next up, you're going to have a double variety. So which these guys are called, double pink. So this is like this really pretty lavender with some really pretty like freckles of burgundy in it. So we've got 1 of those guys. And then you will have 3 of this beautiful spring kind of green variety. So we're going to work all of them in kind of all over the map. Does not matter which side. We're now going to kind of look for holes in our arrangement. So wherever they kind of have popped up over the course of you designing is excellent. The key with Helebore, so there's a really beautiful pattern in which the actual blooms grow. So typically speaking, they grow in this like cup shape. So they kind of are really puckered and have this beautiful cup shape, especially clear on this burgundy variety. Some of them have like a really beautiful lean to them, this light, delicate, airy bounce to them. Some of them grow in just like this really interesting, unique pattern. So that is a beautiful characteristic of our Helebore. So I tend to like to leave my Helebore a little bit farther out of my design so that you can really take that in rather than getting it kind of super tight and choked up where you're maybe not necessarily getting to experience those unique characteristics of it. So with that said, you'll see that I'm leaving my Helebore a little bit farther out of your design. If you feel uncomfortable with that, or if you want to put them in a little bit deeper, certainly go for that. But I'm going to kind of leave mine out so you can really see what's happening with the flower. Let's begin with this guy since we only have 1 of him. If you have a stem like I do, where you have 1 kind of long branching piece that's coming off this central stalk, you can cut that piece off. So I'm just cutting off the jet where it starts, and then I can use this as multiple pieces. If there isn't an obvious kind of space where yours grows off into two different directions, just keep it all together. And then since you maybe have one or two pieces, I'm definitely going to make sure that I work this guy up top in my design so that he has a focal center place. So I have my big Ming fern coming out, whatever side it's on. I'm going to have some hellebore creeping out the top of my design on the opposite side of wherever that top Ming fern is. So you can see I've just kind of have mine creeping out of the top of my design. You may decide you want to kind of get yours in. If you feel like it's leaning out a little bit too far, I would recommend putting in some more of your hellebore, because as you start to have more things that are flowing out beyond kind of the footprint of the arrangement, it starts to feel more natural that lots of things are kind of floating out of the base like that. So I've got this guy kind of holding him up top. I'm going to give him just a little snip off the bottom of his stem, and then I'm going to work this one up top in my design. So I've got him kind of peeking out, and you can see there's still movement to the blooms, still lots of beautiful stuff to look at. So I've got one up top over here. If you were able to cut yours into multiple pieces, my suggestion would be to get a low piece kind of opposite that over here. So for my second piece, just snipped off a teeny tiny bit of the bottom, and then I'm going to work this second bit in a little bit deeper. When we have two of something, I generally will use that same kind of rule of thumb as I'm working my way around. I'll usually do one piece up top and then one piece a little bit lower opposite that. So next up, I'm going to go for my burgundy. Again, this is a great example of got one really long piece, and then I can cut that away and then use this as two pieces. This guy, not the case. It's all the bloom is kind of central up top here. So I'm going to give some love to this other side of my design, and I'm going to get some of this burgundy hellebore up top over here. Here we go. I mentioned before that when we have something on top on this side, we like to counter it a little bit lower over here. So this second little guy, I'm going to pop in on this side a little bit lower. And you can see it's totally fine if things are kind of like stretching out of your base. You don't need to feel like you need to leave things really tight. So this is my second piece. I would just put in that little tiny piece that I had cut off that other stem. But here's my actual official second piece of this purple hellebore, and I just want to take a look at it because when I'm pointing it at the camera, I have no idea what I'm actually doing back here. And I usually like to do just a little adjustment when I get to look at it. Okay. All right. So this is shaping up to be really pretty. This is one of my favorite things we've made in class. Now our green, we're just going to kind of sprinkle this in all over the place. So we have 4 pieces of this. Some of them you may be able to cut in half. Some of them, many of them probably not. But this is a really nice, bright, kind of fun green. So I'm going to make sure that I kind of spread this around in my design. And now I'm just going to look for places. Are there places in your design where you feel like it's darker than the rest, where you could maybe lighten it up with a little bit of this softer green color? So I've got a big dark patch back here where I'm going to have a little bit of this guy floating out. And then just be careful to make sure that you put them on different sides of the arrangement. So you don't want to put all 3 of your green right next to each other. Definitely make sure that each side of your arrangement has a little bit of this special kind of spring green. So I'll show you guys where I put mine. So I brightened up top because I had a lot of green going on, and then I countered that by doing lower over here. And then this last bit of green I'm going to pop into the back of my design where I don't have this color introduced yet. Okay, beautiful. So the last thing that we're going to nestle in are our beautiful burgundy ranunculus. So you should have 2 of these in your bucket. Begin by removing any like little frilly leaves if you have any. These guys, I'm going to do, look for somewhere where maybe you don't have color. Kind of nice stripe of green going on here. I think I'm going to pop my first burgundy ranunculus in that little area around here. So these guys you definitely don't need to leave in super snug either, so you can let them drift out as well. You like the look of that. Also, they look beautiful if you nestle them in a little bit tighter too. So just having that guy kind of creep out. I'm gonna do my second one on this side of the design so we can make sure that we are seeing this color on both sides. And be careful because oftentimes I will think I got my ranunculus stem into the vase and it's actually kind of like sticking out down here. So sometimes it looks like you're like, ooh, that slid in kind of nicely. And then just make sure that it actually did slide into the vase and not down the side of your vase. Okay. Definitely my favorite arrangement we've made so far in class. I love these colors. I think this is like the perfect introduction to spring. We have some richer tones, nice depth with kind of doing the full spectrum of purples. Just to speak a little bit about Helebore because that is kind of our main focal bloom today. Helebore is a bloom that thrives when it's a little bit colder out. So honestly, even really cold it will tolerate. So right about now, and maybe even a couple of weeks ago, you're probably starting to notice that if you have people in your neighborhood or you have in your garden Helebore, you'll see they start to kind of creep up right around now. They love the cold weather, or not frost necessarily, but they do love like a really nice, brisk, cold air. So they're kind of our first touch of floral that we'll start to see as we're creeping into the spring. So these guys kind of come up first. They're the star of the show because they're really the only actual true floral that's out there right now. And then we start to see they kind of thrive a little bit longer, and then we will see that we're getting bulb flowers and lots of stuff coming into April and May. So lots to look forward to in terms of color outside, lots to look forward to in terms of classes coming up with Helen Olivia. So there's tons of really fun stuff on our website. We are about to launch our summer classes. So those I anticipate being really fun and unique. So we've had kind of a brainstorming class or brainstorming sit down in the shop to come up with some novel ideas of classes that we haven't taught thus far. So those should be super fun and unique. Definitely check those out. Find a place in your home where this isn't getting a ton of drafting heat on it. So you don't want to put it next to a heat vent or maybe on like a kitchen countertop that's right next to your dishwasher or stove. But other than that, as long as it's not sitting in a sunny windowsill, this guy should look good through the weekend and beyond. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this class. I adore this arrangement and I hope that you do too. We'll see you again soon.